Now, this is Brandon Carmody with the latest from the LGBTQIA community on the GNR Radio Network.
Hi, Coor.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, welcome back to Gay News Radio. So we wanted to follow up with you to see how the V to Shining V event went. What can you tell us?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I just really appreciate your support, and I'm glad you wanted to follow up. We had an amazing turnout. In fact, I had not exactly planned for it to sell out, so that was really interesting. But we had a wonderful show, completely packed house, and you know, as a comedian who's seen all the other comedians before, I have to say I think some of them gave their best performances to date, at least that I've seen. So really enjoyed it and just so proud to be a part of it. And I will say I needed a couple of days to recoup afterwards.
Can you give us any spoiler alerts? What was some of the topics or subject matter that you covered in your routine?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I covered, a lot of people don't know, I get mistaken a lot for a few different celebrities, particularly, I always say I can tell the sexuality of a woman based upon what celebrity she thinks that I am. I get a lot of Hillary Swanks, and obviously those women are straight. But every once in a while, I'll get a girl from like across the room that her eyes will almost fall out of her head, and I just start shaking my head because I already know that they think I'm Clea DuVille, you know, but I'm a cheerleader, and I'm like, I know, girl, you think I'm your root girl. I know, but I'm not, and I'm so sorry for breaking your heart right now. But yeah, I did a little bit of political stuff. I did a few jokes about ISIS, and feminist catcalls is another joke that I have. Yeah, it was a really fun, great show. I'm pretty bummed because the audio that I was taking from the set ended up being super faint because I was going to put it up on my website, and it was just so loud in the room that you really can't hear anything on the recording, which is a bummer.
Oh, no. So the audio didn't work out. That's a bummer.
It is, yeah. It was a really fun time, and everybody was just on their A game. We had a great, great show.
Well, that's great. We've been in contact with the Lady Justice League and continually tweeted out our support, Coor, and glad you had a great set. Now, I wanted to let you know
so much.
I saw a protest outside of Planned Parenthood in Portland/Milwaukee the other day. So obviously Planned Parenthood is in the news right now, and there's a lot of discussion going on there. I believe the head of Planned Parenthood was held up in front of interrogated in front of a congressional committee for 5.5 hours. Did you see that?
Yeah, Cecile Richards, you know, and she did such a phenomenal job against Trey Gowdy, who, quite frankly, was unbelievably disrespectful. You know, when you ask someone a question, you let them answer it, period. You know, and Cecile Richards is the CEO of Planned Parenthood and the daughter of Democratic Texas Governor Ann Richards. A lot of people don't know that. So it's really great for me to be able to watch Cecile, and I've been following her career for several years, and she's part of the reason that I feel like I have part of the platform that I have today, is that, you know, Ann Richards fought for really the right. I mean, she was the first female governor of the state of Texas, period, back in the 80s, and she really had an uphill battle, and the legislative lobby the business lobby was highly aggressive against her. So watching Cecile and watching quite a bit of her questioning, I'll put it a little bit lighter on interrogation, but, I just saw so much of just the vigor and the resilience and the spark of her mother that I was like, wow, just looking at that lineage and seeing that, Planned Parenthood is civil service, and just kind of seeing that her continue on the legacy of what her mother, who was a school teacher, who everyone said would have no business running a state, it really touched me. I got pretty emotional watching Cecile, actually, and I saw her post-interview with Rachel Maddow, and she didn't look worn or weathered. She looked invigorated, and I walked away from that hoping that I could probably be half the individual that she was.
Oh yeah, and they attacked her for her salary of $520,000 a year, but she, as you mentioned, is running such a vast nationwide organization that's what it takes to run it.
She's one of the lowest paid CEOs in the country, I'm pretty sure, of any non-small business.
Right.
I mean, if you look at CEO salaries, I think less than $1 million a year is not exactly the CEO salary that you want to go picking with.
Now, one thing I wanted to get your feedback on, this has happened since we last spoke. So in the GOP debate, Carly Fiorina, who stole the thunder from all of those men on stage, talking about the Planned Parenthood videos and her dramatic speech about, the fetus is on the table and its heart beating, its legs are kicking. Well, she did an entire round of Sunday shows, and I watched host after host after host try to debunk her and say, well, actually, the videos are doctored or a composite of other videos, and no one can verify the authenticity. And she denied, and she literally vehemently stuck to her guns about that Planned Parenthood. But it's been debunked, and no one can verify the authenticity. Even Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi are all saying that it's a bunch of garbage. It's not right. So she won't admit that she made an error.
Well, I don't even think that it's an error. I think that in politics we need to stop saying phrases like misspeak and mistruth and start calling a spade. It's blatant lying. And it's a manipulation tactic, period. And Chuck Todd, who it has long been the senior political analyst for NBC, prior to taking over Meet the Press, was about as polite as absolutely possible to Carly Fiorina.
I saw it.
And if you got caught lying in the workplace in that fashion, it would not only go all through your colleagues pretty quickly, but it would probably be grounds for dismissal. And so to be able to continue to say that these are misspeakings or mistruths is completely ridiculous. And the Fiorina campaign manager is nothing short of, and you can quote me on this, a hot mess, because she has been misspeaking on quite a vast array of numbers, including economically. And when you look at Carly Fiorina's record, I think it's really interesting that the GOP has been trying to paint that the trustworthiness factor over Hillary Clinton based on emails is that she is so untrustworthy because of the fact that here's an individual with Fiorina who has been running Sonnenfeld through the ground regarding his comments about her. But as someone with a background in economics and having my Series 7, one thing I just want to say is that there is no dispute on Carly Fiorina's record at HP. In 1999, when the dot-com bubble burst, the dot-com bubble was about virtual businesses. It had nothing to do with hardware manufacturers, which is exactly what HP is. So to try to use that as a reason why her business was doing poorly is an interesting spin to me. But then also, when you look at the stock splits, I mean, if you have a whole of something and then you split it in half, and then at the end you're still less than what you started with, I don't care what way you try to slice it, that's not a success. So even if she was just running on her record, aside from these astronomical, really, allegations, I just find it completely remarkable that anyone takes her as a serious candidate. And I also think, too, that it really goes to show the religious fanaticism that I think is fueling the GOP and the individuals who choose to capitalize on that fanaticism. You know, I was telling you previously, I moved here from the South. I'm 29, I've lived in 22 cities. So I've experienced quite a bit of American culture. And she looks to me as someone who's capitalizing on fear and on hyperbole in order to get her message across. And I just think it's a very dangerous game, and that Democrats need to, and independents need to really focus on getting the vote out, because that is really where the percentages lie, is that as long as there is voter turnout through the Democratic Party along with independents, pretty consistently we win elections. But when you look at the 2014 election, the midterms, what we noticed was there was a significant drop in voters. And so the big part of V to Shiny V across the whole country, you know, here in Oregon, we're all so lucky to be registered to vote with our driver's license. But in a lot of places, it isn't like that. So mostly what V to Shiny V was a huge voter outreach program. While it was a little bit of a fundraiser, it was really about let's sign people up to vote. Let's get you on the rolls, because that's what matters. And if we're making sure that young people coming out of high school, young women in college, and that 18 to 35-year-olds are voting, well, it's really no contest.
I'm glad that you brought up the GOP. So the House panel, listen to this. The House Energy Committee on Wednesday advanced a fast-track bill to defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year and repeal an Obamacare public health fund. So they're attacking Obamacare again, and they're going after Planned Parenthood at the same time. It's the same
today or last week?
This was today. They're literally still trying to find ways to attack Planned Parenthood and attach it to Obamacare. In something that is absolutely guaranteed to be vetoed by President Obama. It has no chance of passing.
Well, these symbolic votes are nothing new. These symbolic votes are nothing new because they want to have something to go back to their constituents with. But in my experience, the majority of constituents in these type of districts can't even name who their representatives are. You know, it's a campaign based on ignorance. One thing that President Obama has pushed for is internet access in rural communities. And that's something that you would think would be a universal celebration, a bipartisan effort. But it is something that early on in the Obama administration was fought tooth and nail. And in my personal opinion, and not from a PolitiFact aspect, is that we know that education is what breaches the barriers. We know that when you educate people, when you give them the resources, they will make the decisions that are best for them. And preventing that is just the last ditch efforts that they have.
You know, I noticed that there's a social media campaign to change your profile photos pink to say I stand with Planned Parenthood. So there's a lot of pink online, if you've noticed. So there's a lot of online support.
Yeah, definitely. And we just hope that for those who are financially able, that they'll be able to turn their online support into financial support and into grassroots support, encouraging your friends to vote, knocking on doors, getting revitalized, because the costs are real. You know, a big part of the reason why I made the commitment to leave the South, I lived in a major city, I lived in Nashville, but a big part of the reason why is that the restrictive legislation is so harmful. It restricts your choice to access there for not just women's health care, but overall health care. And then if you get into tax plans, which we won't go there tonight, but if you get into tax plans, you know, it's a very regressive and flat-out oppressive system. And if you look at the legislation passed by Bobby Jindal, per se, and some other governors, it's almost appalling to think that in the 21st century that this is still an issue.
Well, and the government was at a point of near shutdown again today. Apparently they passed a continuing resolution to fund the government through December, so we know what the expression is here. It's kicking the can down the road. It's where we're going to have the fight again in 2 months. And Planned Parenthood was at the heart of the debate over whether or not to fund or shut down the government. So,
well, they actually did this at the exact same budget vote time 2 years ago, so it's very cyclical. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is that, you know, they funded it through the 11th of December, so not all the way through to the first of the year, but then it's also going to give another pre-dismissal vote. So before they all go back on break, they're going to have to sit down and do it again. And if 2 years ago, when they did the secondary vote in December, like they did last time, if they would just pass a budget resolution, it's not that difficult. It's not difficult to agree on the fact that, okay, staffers get paid. Okay, lights get to be on. I mean, this is not partisan whatsoever. And what it is, it's come down to a really intense game of chicken where the GOP is trying to push and push to be like, okay, we're going to wait until the very last minute to see if there's any way that you're going to waver, and we're going to get our way. And I think that I think that if Democrats had done anything like this whatsoever when George W. Bush was in office, that they would be labeled unpatriotic, possibly even traitors with some of the verbiage that was used. And while taking the high road is something that one should always do, I do often think about the fact that what if Democrats didn't always take the high road?
This would be a good time to mention that Speaker Boehner surprisingly, resigned his speakership this week because of the challenges within the GOP. Well, I'm using nice words on the radio here. Challenges within the GOP party. Of course, it was undoubted that he was about to face more challenges from within his own party, his own speakership in danger, but he could have survived the vote. But doesn't that just speak to how much infighting and how much carnage is going on inside the GOP that Boehner is pulling out?
Well, I think Boehner's been looking for a way out for a while. I think for quite some time. I think especially 2 years ago, it was pretty obvious that there were quite a few whispers going around. I shouldn't say obvious for someone like me, but there were quite a few whispers going around about Boehner considering resignation. But I do think that what it tells us is that pretty much unless you are an Old Testament Republican, you have no place in the modern GOP. And that's dangerous. Very, very dangerous.
We've passed marriage equality. There's legislation and a state-by-state fight, and right now the Equality Act is going through for getting some national LGBT protection. So, I mean, they're not up to the standards of where we're at as a country. So we still have this deep divide.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say we need to pass ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. That is the absolute most important. And I'll tell you a little story about I dated a woman for about 4 years in Nashville, and we were together for quite some time. And one of my employers, it was the general manager, the person who made sure I was paid, not only threatened to terminate my job, but also threatened to come to my home, in which he had my home address, to break in and to sexually assault both me and my partner in an effort to teach us a lesson. This was my employer at the time. There was no recourse of action that we could really take besides a private suit for threatening. That was it. So ENDA is something very, very close to my heart, and I think we should pass it immediately.
Yes, and Chad Griffin from the Human Rights Campaign spoke on that, basically saying that now with marriage equality, you can get married at noon, post photos
this
of your
is
wedding
GNR,
on Facebook at
Gay News Radio.
Fired by 5.
Fired from your job by the end of the day by 5, right? And that's true in a lot of cases. That really is true, isn't it? There's no protections from stopping you from termination. You'd have no recourse, right?
Absolutely. I also worked for a Toyota dealership when I lived in the South, and it was very well known that if you were homosexual, that was best to be kept to yourself if you wanted to keep your job. And these are major companies that I'm talking about.
Part of the culture.
Part of the culture.
Employers just want. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's about that code of silence.
Absolutely, absolutely. And people don't realize it is so serious. The last time I was on, I talked about, you asked me what some of the legislation is that I'd like to have passed, and I didn't get a chance to mention ENDA because I was thinking about just trans protections in general. I mean, there is an entire quarter or 40% of the country that is not only blind to these issues, but they almost consider themselves more than or better than or a specific selection of, or that there is something wrong with you because you are different from their ideological ideals. And it's just so dangerous. And when you're in a place like Portland, or even in a place like Nashville, where you feel like you're removed from it, once you start to get outside those very tight county lines around the city, it doesn't take very long to see what's really going on. And I'm sure that probably the rural communities of Oregon here probably experience some of the same things, and other rural communities in the Pacific Northwest. I wouldn't say it's exclusive to one region of the country. I think that pretty much once you get outside of the hub of cities and their surrounding suburbs, rights can become pretty desolate, quite like the geography.
That's interesting because we have a guest that's going to be live reporting from there pretty soon, and that guest compared it to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and said, well, at least it's not Jonesboro, Arkansas. So we, of course, don't mean to throw Arkansas under the bus. I'm sure the cultures are very different, but in terms of the challenges you'd go through,
absolutely,
in a lot safer territory in one versus the other, if you're going to be out and free with your sexuality.
Absolutely, yeah. And when I mentioned the 4 of the threatened sexual assault by my employer, I lived in a major city and I worked for a very large company. And I had we contacted we contacted an attorney, and then we also contacted the ACLU to kind of find out essentially like where we were, what our rights were, and it literally boiled down to a he said, she said.
And I've been in a
pretty
similar
remarkable.
position, Coor. I've seen that at the personal level.
Absolutely. And it's just remarkable. And so now I try to use my platform, however large or small that it may be at the time, to just really like, shine that light and be like, hey, I see your behavior. It's not acceptable and it won't be tolerated.
Another thing that we learned this week, we had a guest on who has been in the news for having been singled out by TSA for being flagged for an anomaly during the scan. And we learned some horrifying details, which are, A, there's really only 2 buttons for a TSA agent to hit prior to a scan, which is male or female. There's no middle sex. There's no alternative option. So literally they're marginalizing virtually all trans travelers prior to, going through the scanner. I mean, they're setting them up for this disastrous and invasive experience. We know that trans equality and several other groups are either in private negotiations or direct lawsuits against the TSA because this is the entire TSA at every single airport. I mean, their machines are set up in this fashion. So if you don't identify your biological gender, say it's male, if you say female, and it scans you improperly, you get flagged as a potential threat or terrorist. And think about where that can go.
That's horrible. I think at a federal level, I do have hope that once this issue gets enough attention, I do think that it's something that could easily be remedied within the Department of Transportation and a TSA. I think that's something that, it's just going to have to get enough light for people to really hear that. And I spoke with a woman recently, and she was like, I'm a pretty busty lady. And she said, so is she. And she has like long blonde hair. And I said to her, because she was talking to me about trans issues, and she was like, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. Like, why is it such a big problem? And I said, have you ever had somebody say that you look like a man? And she was like, yeah, they were just trying to be mean. It totally, it was awful. And I said, you ever had someone call you sir? And she was like, oh, yeah, one time. It was like the worst. And I said, imagine going through that at the bank, at the airport, at your job.
Restaurants.
Everywhere. Everything that happens to you. Imagine being degraded in such a way and completely insulted. And she was like, I never considered that. And I was like, well, in the future, before you open your mouth, you might want to take into some consideration. And I felt kind of bad because, I'm a little sassy. And I made her feel really bad about it. But I was like, everyone's been in that situation where they've been accidentally called the wrong gender and been completely offended. And so I find it remarkable that people can't wrap their head around the idea that,
well, I'm a telephone operator. I've been called ma'am. I've been called ma'am in my day job as a phone operator, and I guess I can see that.
Right, absolutely.
Easy mistake, right?
Right.
But one thing I can tell you that we're taking on, and we're a pretty new show. We just launched on September 5th. I mean, we're not even at our 30-day anniversary, but we're trying to tackle the issues of the LGBTQIA community. And I'm telling you, it's literally a trial by fire. The more people that talk to us, the more guests that come on the show, the more news articles I get my hands on. I literally am becoming an avid reader and just taking it all in. And while I am very surprised, I think my biggest mission right now is just to get educated on everything that really is going on so that we can sort of follow the ball, because there is so much going on. I mean, we don't want to lose, the issues going on with LGBT youth, as well as what's still happening with some state challenges on marriage equality, trans issues. There's so much within our community that's all going on at the same time. So I'm very busy just trying to keep the radar on it all. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, it appears that you guys have a great following so far, and I'm so proud to be invited onto your program and to Gay News Radio, and to highlight issues that are affecting everyone. And I'm glad that you use all the letters. I'm a big fan of that. And if any of your listeners are listening that are in the business community, in the Portland metro area, I suggest that they check out the Portland Area Business Association. That's PABA, and that is the LGBTQIA Chamber of Commerce. And we do tons of great stuff involving youth, trans issues, coming together, being a part of the business community. And just like the Chamber of Commerce is a more right-leaning legislative arm, PABA is part of the NGLCC, and they do exactly the same thing, but for the issues that we're fighting for.
Terrific. And I've seen them sponsor Pride for many years, so I'm aware of them. That's a great organization, the PABA.
Yeah, absolutely. And like all small businesses, you know, if you are a florist or an interior designer or a hairstylist, or you own a construction company, whatever your business is, if you support the community, you know, join PABA. Come be a part of us. We really, really want to reach out and find as many business owners as we can to come on board. And that's for allies as well, for sure.
We'll make sure to link PABA up in this article. Cohen, thanks for coming on. Do you have any more gigs coming up or anything planned next?
Well, I'm always working quite a bit. You can follow me on Twitter at Coor Cohen. That's COOR Cohen, COHEN on Twitter. And I'm usually linking my show listings there, or at least website updates.
Terrific. Well, we're so glad for you to come back, second appearance on GNR. We'll keep in touch, and if you follow us, we're going to keep our radar on the entire community and keep these important issues in the spotlight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Thanks. Have a good night, Coor.
This is GNR, Gay News Radio.